Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Families Fly Free podcast. Today we're going to talk about all things national parks because I know that we have a lot of you who that is tops on your list is to get to more national parks. I know we have a lot of Families Fly Free members that have made it kind of their mission to visit all 50, or Cami on the Families Fly Free team. She and her husband are just trying to get to not all of them, but as many as they can reasonably get to. So I know that's important to a lot of people. My family enjoys the national parks too, though we haven't quite seen. There's plenty more that we have left to see, is what I should say. So I've invited on with me today Bryanna Royal. And I've known Bryanna for quite a while now. She led a great webinar for us a couple of years ago when we had a travel summit, all about her family's adventures traveling around the country in an RV and giving tips if you want to travel in an RV with your family. So they spent from 2014 to 2022, and she's in a family of six, um, traveling around the country in an RV. You can only imagine the amazing things they've, I'm sure, seen and places they've been. And then they have even spent 3 months backpacking in Europe. Sounds amazing. And she's written a book called Full Time RVing with Kids. And you can find her over at crazyfamilyadventure.com, where you can see all kinds of information about all the places they've been. So, welcome, Bryanna. Um, I know that you know lots about the national parks because visiting them in an RV would sure be a great way to get to lots of them. But so I just thought we'd start off by having you, if you want to share anything else that I didn't include in my little intro there, and just tell us kind of about your experience in the national parks.
Of course. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love doing podcasts. It's such a fun way to just get on and share knowledge and talk and chat and for us to catch up, right? Life's so busy you never even get a chance just to talk. So this is great. So
So busy
thank you
traveling
for
everywhere.
yeah. So thank you for having me on. And yes, I love the national parks and sharing all about that and encouraging families, like people that are retired, young people, whoever wants to go and explore them. I do think it is a place that all different ages of people can enjoy the national parks. And the intro you gave to me before I get into that, perfect, nothing to add. That was great. Now we're just kind of boring and living in a house and based on our kids' choice to want to get into sports and live a normal life, as they said, which we're hoping at some point they realize isn't as cool as they thought. But in any case, here we are.
And what are the ages of your kids now?
Right now, they are 16, 14, 14, and 11. So we are at that point that it is the right place for them to be to really get into the
Yeah.
sports. And, we're still homeschooling, but they're enjoying life being in one place. And we're trying to enjoy it. My husband and I are making the most out of it. So
Yeah, yeah. And they had that experience of all that travel. So
they did. They hit the point where they said, "We don't want to travel anymore. We don't want to see another waterfall. We don't want to see another national park." We're like, okay, but
do you think they'll come back around to that?
I think they will. They've been starting to have like even random things they'll say, but they'll say like, "Well, mom, I really miss this, but I mean, I don't want to do it again." So like, it's like they're afraid if they say it too much. They're like, "All right, let's go, get in the RV, let's go." So they're definitely saying things, but still like loving being here and playing the sports and doing the things we're doing here and having a house and all that, which I can appreciate too. There's lots about it that I like too, but lots we miss about being on the road. But that being said, the national parks have always been a thing for us that has been high on our list to do and see and visit. And over the years, we visited 37 national parks. And we visited a few of them up in Alaska this past summer. We took the kids on a 2 month road trip. We took them out of the house and all the stuff and said, let's go. And headed up to Alaska for 2 months and visited a couple
Wow.
national parks there as well. Now, Alaska, harder to get to the national parks. Some of them you have to fly to, you have to do all sorts of different ways to get there. So we only hit two of them, but it was a really cool experience and glad we got a chance to do that. But yes, excited to be on today and just talk about visiting national parks. And I do feel like sometimes people get a little bit worried about visiting a national park. Like, oh my gosh, do I need to like buy the Patagonia jacket? And do I need to have like the best hiking boots out there? And do I need to like, what about bears? And what about, like whatever? And my biggest thing I try to tell people is you don't need any of that. Like my kids have hiked all the trails, some barefoot, sometimes in Crocs. I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where it has like, you're so worried about hiking this trail with all your gear on, someone's decked out in all the gear. And then little kid, they're like, my little kid just hiked it carrying their Barbie doll, wearing Crocs with their t-shirt on.
I know. I always feel like inevitably when we're on a hiking trail, it just seems like you said, there's that kind of thing passing us left and right. And there's, older people, there's pregnant women that are just like doing it like it's no problem whatsoever. Or no water bottles. That's another one that gets me is I'm just like, how do you, I have like 6 bottles of water in my backpack, right? They've got one little water bottle and they're doing this long hike. But yeah, that's a good point.
Exactly.
I think that you don't have to have all this stuff enable to be able to go to a national park.
No,
Let
not
me
at
just
all.
ask you, what do you think, what would be the basics to have?
I think really the basics are everything you already have in your house. Like if you ever go outside and walk around the block, like you're set. Like that's what you need. And like, of course, like bringing like layers and things like that, always a good idea depending on weather. We never know what to expect with that. If you're going to go to Yellowstone in winter, yes, that's a little different. But if we're talking like, regular when everyone else goes time of year in the summer, spring, fall, I think just having a pair of tennies and, pants and a jacket and a hat and some gloves with you just in case, like you're good to go. And then of course water is important. It's good to have water. And again though, even for water, like I think you can make a 1 mile hike just fine without drinking any water. If you're
Wow,
planning
not
six,
me.
10 if you had to, you could.
Yeah, right, there you go.
Yeah, if you're planning a 6, 10, 15 mile hike, that's a whole nother story. Then you're starting to plan more for it. But if you want to just go visit Yellowstone National Park, like most people don't even get more than a mile off of the main road. So
Mm,
if you want to do a big hike and you want to have a national park experience like that, which we highly recommend, then yeah, it may make more sense to make sure that you're well equipped with it. But we have never had hiking sticks. My kids never had the expensive like hiking shoes or any of that type of stuff, and we've taken the kids and hiked 12, 15 miles with the kids, sometimes even unexpectedly. Oh, let's go 6 miles. Oh wait, how's everyone doing? You're doing good, let's keep going. And then we've just continued to go, so with no additional planning like involved in it. So I do feel like it is something you can just bring the basics. Don't make that be what stops you from visiting a national park thinking you need to buy all this stuff before you go.
and I will say the one thing that I have liked is the hiking sticks, just for me, because I get nervous sometimes, like on the rock
Yeah.
scrambling and the ledges, and it just makes me, it's probably not doing anything, makes me feel a little bit more steady.
Yeah.
Everyone else in my family pays no attention. They're just going on or
Exactly, and that's one of those things for you, if it's something you feel you need to have, like, they go for and they also sell them at the national park, so if you go on one hike and you're like, "Oh, like, I really wish I would've," they do sell all that stuff there, you'll be able to get it there, but again, it's you can do it without, I guess is what I'm saying is don't
Mhm.
make yourself not go because you can't find the best hiking sticks.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. So tell us if there's anything that we need to know in 2024 that's different about going to the national parks. I know, since COVID, we've kind of seen the implementation of these different reservation systems, some for whole parks, some for specific hikes, and or transportation. Sometimes can be an issue in some of these different parks. So is there anything that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think just above all, there are certain parks that do have where you need to get a vehicle registration before you go. And some of them you want to try to get 3, 4 months out from your date you're going to go. So I would say, if anything, it's very important to look up the national park you're going to go to and the dates you want to go and check if there is a vehicle registration that's required for it. And right now, going into 2024, I believe there's just 8 parks that are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 parks that are requiring some type of reservations. And that's Arches, Glacier, Mount Rainier, Shenandoah, Rocky Mountain, Yosemite, Zion, Acadia, and I cannot say this one right, Haleakala in Hawaii. So for those ones, you do need it now. For some of those ones, like for Acadia, you only need it to do Cadillac Mountain. And so you don't need it to see the whole park, just if you're going to do Cadillac Mountain. So there are some that it is limited as to what you need them for. But if you're planning a trip to any of those national parks, I would highly recommend getting on their website, the actual national park website, and just going to vehicle registration. They've done a really good job of laying out what those restrictions are, what you need to have it, times to get it, and all of that. And then I'll add that and there's also, if you're going to do backcountry camping at places, you a lot of the times need to also get, register for that. Or if you're going to be doing, yeah, in some places, there are specific hikes you need things for. So just do your research up front on the place you're going and check those dates to see what you need to get for it. But all that being said, if you're someone that has a trip planned for Glacier and you're like, oh my gosh, I missed getting the vehicle registration, don't worry. Go anyways, because you only need vehicle registration from like 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., I believe is what Glacier is for 2024. Don't quote me on that. Always double check the site.
I think you're right.
But
Yeah.
it is light out in Glacier until like 10 p.m. in the summer. So guess
Okay. That's a
what?
good tip.
You go at 3:15 and you can go wherever you wanna go, and if you're like us,
Mhm.
we're like, "Let me sleep in and get up and go," and then there's less crowds. Also, because everyone normally thinks you have to start your day at, like, 6 a.m. to go visit a national park, which to me sounds miserable. So instead, sleep in, have a good breakfast, there's things to do around the park, go do that, go do the things you don't need the vehicle registration for, because there are things you can do that you don't need it for, and then just plan on hitting going to the Sun Road at 3:15, and most likely there's not going to be as many people on it because everyone else is done for the day and back and eating dinner and doing that. So if you kind of just flip your way that you visit the park, I think there are ways around not needing the vehicle registration if you can be flexible like that.
Yeah, I love that you said that because that's how my family operates too. We don't like to be up at the crack of dawn. None of
No.
us, but I'm probably the most morning person of our group. But, and so we have always kind of done it that way too. Like we would just roll in when everybody else was rolling out. And we
Mhm.
did pretty well, but we haven't tried to do it in the last 2 years. And I just feel like everyone's saying, oh, you just have to get there at the crack of dawn or you just forget it these days. But and on Glacier, like we have not done Glacier because, and I've talked to this with Leslie a couple podcasts ago, but it just intimidates me because of the two sides. And so, can you, like, the going to the Sun Road is like a 3 or 4 hour drive in itself, right? So, like, if you were going to do this in the afternoon, how would you recommend, say, doing both sides later in the day?
So there's a couple of ways that we recommend it. And I would say it's more like maybe a 2.5 hour drive. It could be 3 to 4 if you
Okay.
stop and take a lot of pictures and everything like that. So leave that in your day. But what we've done, and this is only, of course, if you're feeling comfortable and you can do it, but we've driven the going to the Sun Road to get to the Many Glacier side to do things. And then we've driven the going to the Sun Road back in the dark. Now, in the
Okay.
dark, it made it a little bit more scary, because it's in the dark and it's scary as it is. But we saw a mama bear and two cubs crossing the road in the dark and, like, saw some
Mm,
cool things. But if you don't want to do the going to the Sun Road back, you can actually drive around the park and you don't
which that
have to.
looks really long too, right?
It is long. It's going to be long no matter what. So if you're like,
Okay.
oh my gosh, that amount of driving in a day sounds miserable, then I recommend my second recommendation is that you stay in the St. Mary's area of Glacier National Park for a night. So plan on just driving there, doing the going to the Sun Road as your trip, as what you're doing for that day, and then spend the night in St. Mary's and then get up the next morning and then go into the Many Glacier area of the park to explore that part of the park. Because I would definitely recommend doing Many Glacier. It's a gorgeous part of the park and not something you want to skip. Check the vehicle registrations though for Many Glacier. There may be some restrictions around that this year as well. So make sure to check that and see if you do need a separate vehicle registration to get into that part of the park. I'm not sure if that's in place this year. I have it in my blog post, but I don't have it memorized.
Yeah, yeah.
If
There's
you
a
need it
lot
there.
to know on these, yeah. But you
Yes,
do have to have it for the road, right?
for the going to the Sun
Yeah,
Road is here from 6 a.m. until I believe it's 3 p.m. You do
right.
need to have it. And then again, so outside of that window, you're fine.
Outside of
Or
that.
if you don't have it, you can drive. So the two oh geez, what's it called? And I totally blanked on what it's called. Two tunnel mountain, I believe it's called, part of Glacier that like no one really goes to is on that other side of it. So if you decide to drive around it, there is a place there you can stop and explore. And there's some fun hikes to do. There's a cool lodge there.
Okay.
There's lots of fun things to do there. But yeah, the reality is I feel like going to almost any national park, you're going to be driving like a lot because these national parks are huge and cover a massive area. But usually the scenery is amazing. So it's worth it.
And they're not near any major metropolises. Usually, like Utah, like, inevitably we fly into Las Vegas and then you got to drive to where they are. So, like you said, you just have to accept that's going to be part of the deal. And
Yep. Yep. And
it's
plan
just
for that.
figuring out the best way to navigate it. But I know you have a good, and you've got information on your website too, kind of like guides on
Yes, yeah,
how to do these parks.
we have a ton of blog posts on almost all of these parks, and then we also sell actual guides for 1 day, 3 day, or 7 day guide slash itineraries for Glacier, for Yellowstone, for Acadia, for Arches National Park, just to try to help you put a plan together on how you want to approach the park and how you want to do it. Now, all that being said, I am the least planner when it comes to our trip. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I do not want to have to worry about planning every single aspect of my trip. We have shown up at national park after national park without a plan. And the day before, went in and saw the rangers and said, hey, what do you recommend we do? Listened to what they said, and then went out the next day and did it. So if you're someone that
Love
wants to
that. I'm not a
fly,
planner either.
yes. So if you want to fly by the seat of your pants, by all means, you can do it now, as long as you accept that you may miss things because of that. So there has been times we've done that. They were like, oh man, we can't do that because we needed some type of, registration, or this it's closed now. We didn't even know it. We would have came a week later or a week earlier or whatever. So as long as you can accept that you may miss things, you can definitely do a national park by the seat of your pants. Just go for it and enjoy it. If there are things you want to do, it always makes sense to sit down and plan ahead and see when things are open. Again, Glacier going to the Sun Road normally is open by beginning of July, but there's been times it hasn't opened till after July 4th. So you could get to the park in June and the going to the Sun Road is closed, and that is like one of the highlights of Glacier. So we always, in our opinion, we recommend going in August because you're almost guaranteed that the road is going to be open. Snow should all be gone and all of that. And it's a beautiful time to be in Glacier. So there are things like that you want to look into and just kind of know. I know for Yosemite too, there's some things that aren't always open. Some waterfalls aren't running, or, like things like that. So it's always good to do some research up front to know when is the best time to go and why, based on what you want to do when you get there.
And like Glacier, since it's not necessarily always open, like does like everybody show up in July and August? I always worry about that being a problem there too. It's such a popular one. It's so beautiful. Like is everybody crammed into July and August?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, July, August, and beginning of September is like a busy time. September probably a little less because people go back to school and everything.
Mhm.
But we've had the same experience. People say the same thing about Yellowstone, about Glacier, but we were there the whole month of August in Glacier, and we went and did every single hike we wanted to do and found a parking spot every single time. If you're just patient,
Okay.
we would drive around to find a parking spot, or we would say, okay, we're not going to do this one today. We'll come back tomorrow. We did not get up at 8 a.m. I don't think one day we were there, like, to go do it. So we showed up
Yay.
at 4 o'clock and, 4 o'clock and did the hike, whatever. And some of them we were walking back and it was like sun starting to set a little bit. And yeah, with grizzlies, you want to be, aware of your timing and everything. But we were always able to do everything. So I think if you go in with patience, one, and then two, also knowing your schedule may have to adjust, and that's okay. Just adjust as you go. But then know, like, as soon as you start hiking, in most of the cases, you'll be on a hike with, you'll see maybe five people, because most people aren't going more than a mile or two in. So if you really want to get away from the crowds, go on like a 3 or 4 mile hike and you'll realize, like, you'll feel like no one's there.
So any talking about crowds, any other tips to avoid crowds other than trying this later in the day and
I
hiking a
think
little bit further?
No, I think well, off season is always a good time. And like for Glacier, I would say off season would be like going in like September. Or Yellowstone would be going like in like maybe May, or maybe again September. If you can avoid those prime times and when kids are off of school and all of that is happening, I think you can definitely avoid crowds that way. If you can't do that, I think it's kind of like you just accept it. Like you just accept it's going to be crowded. You accept things are going to take a little bit longer, and you try to just really go in. One, you plan a trip that's long enough to allow you to adjust your time. So like if you're going to Yellowstone, like a week, like you should be able to get everything in, but if you can, go for like 10 days. So you
Mm.
have those extra days in there, that then if you're just like, oh, I'm over the crowds, I just, don't want to deal with this, then you have a day you can just kind of hang out, go sit on the lodge porch and, like, have happy hour and just take a really slow day where you're not doing the high tourist things. And I would say the other part of it too is every time we visited a park, like let's say Yosemite, for example, everyone's in the valley in Yosemite. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, you want to do it. But if you go just a little bit outside of those main areas, there's a part in Yosemite that you can go to. I'm going to say it wrong. It's like Tulumen or something. It's pronounced. You go to that part. There was like no one there, and it's still like these like gorgeous views. So if you can look in Smoky Mountain National Park, we did the same thing. Like we went to an area that most people don't go to. We entered from a different spot. We went to a different area, and it was just so much less busy. So there are, in every national park, I feel you can find places that aren't busy. They just may not be the top highest known attraction, which of course you want to see. You have to see Old Faithful, don't get me wrong. but you can see Old Faithful, and then you can drive like to Lake in Yellowstone, and like there's no one there. You could go sit on a beach at Lake in Yellowstone, and there will be no one there. So you can find these other places if you're willing to go a little bit outside of what everyone else is doing.
And what's a good way to find what some of those good places are?
That would be my website, Crazy
Okay.
Family, but no, that's one way to do it. But I think, of course, nowadays you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, you search things up on there and you'll see people posting about things. You also just go in and talk to the rangers when you get to the national park.
That's Yeah, they
That's
probably can direct you to everybody's going this way today.
Yep, exactly. And
Uh-huh.
I think for them, if you go in, like we always stop, even though we've done parks multiple times, every time we go to a park again, even if it's the third or fourth time we've been there, we go to talk to the rangers just to ask them what's open, what's closed, what do you recommend? And even to say to them, this is our fourth time here. Like we've seen everything you're telling everyone else. Like, what else do you recommend? And we've gotten some really, really good recommendations from people. They get excited when you say that. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, let me tell you, go here. And a lot of the times, there are even places that aren't even in the park. They're like, this is
Right.
right outside the entrance, like around the corner. It's like it's this amazing place. And again, you go and no one's there. And that's because that's not where they're sending, because they know most people want to check the list of, the
Yeah.
top things to do in the park. So I would definitely say talk to the rangers. And if you're a planner, like get online and research. But when you're Googling, like let's say things to do in Yellowstone, make sure you're reading which article you're clicking on and avoid the Reddits, avoid the Quoras, avoid the like travel and leisure, like avoid all of that and find an actual blogger, like a person that is an actual physical person that you can see their picture in the article. You can see their video they put out there. So, they actually went there and experienced it, because those are going to be the ones that are going to tell you the true story, not just the high level highlights of it.
Right. Not just the things that are getting those people high up on Google, say, for
Yes.
example. They're just making a list to make themselves get high, right? Out
Yes.
there. Okay, here's a question. So like we one time we were in Utah and we were trying to go to one side of Canyonlands, and it was Saturday though, so that's probably the problem. But we showed up and it was like an hour-long line just to get into the park. Any suggestions on like how to avoid that situation?
I would say for that, either one, don't go on a Saturday, or I
Problem
would
number one.
Yes, I would say that. I would say 2 is to go, like, show up at, like, noon, like, or 2 o'clock, like, some random I don't know what time you guys went at, but it would seem usually if you're getting a little bit later, again in the day, you have a better chance. Or 3 would be bring a good book to read while you're sitting in line and just sit there and wait and know it's gonna take an hour to get in, and, like, it is what it is. Like, that's okay. Like, we can wait. Like, we can be patient, put on a podcast, put on your podcast, put on a book on tape or something like that, and just kinda know, make sure you have snacks and water and all that in the car, and just know like that may be part of what's going to happen on your trip there, and that's okay. Like I think sometimes that is just what it is.
Yeah. And I think we ended up just saying, like, we turned around and went, never mind, because if it's already this busy, with the line, we were afraid to be too busy inside. So I suppose you could do that too. Just like you said, if you've allowed for enough time, you can be like, oh, let's go do something else today. And then we'll try this again tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes when the line is that long, like I feel like I know in Acadia we wanted to see this lighthouse, and there was like a line of cars to wait for it. But the reality was that everyone drove in, they parked, they took 10 minutes to go see the lighthouse, and then they left. So like
Mm,
people are rotating on, and like I think Canyonlands is a good example. There's not a ton of things at Canyonlands that's going to take you a lot of time. So my guess is that most people in Canyonlands are only going to be in, and I think I know what section of the park you'd be in. We're only going to be there for so long. So people will rotate out. And there's not really any food to eat there. So people have to either bring food or they have to leave at a certain time to go eat. So again, I feel like we've always really tried to ignore people saying, well, it's too busy, don't go, or it's whatever, and just push through. And
okay.
I want to say 90% of the time it's paid off. Like it's been worth it. And we've been able to get to a spot in a park and say, like, let's go do this. And like once we did that and got in, like it was a great time and we were glad we did it.
Yeah, I love this. This is like, don't be intimidated by visiting the national parks in any way, right? Just go
Yeah.
and do it.
Go and do it and have patience and know it's going to not be like, well, it is going to be like Disney, because how long do you wait in line when you go to Disney? Hours you wait in line a day. So if
Not
you have
with
to
Genie Plus, but
well, that's true. If you figure out things like that, but the majority of people are going to be probably spending time waiting, or you're getting
right.
on the tram, or you're doing whatever. Like, so don't expect that a
That's
national park
true.
is, yeah, it's going to be in a national park. You're just going to drive into a big open field and no one's there. Like, there are national parks for a reason. Or if that is something that turns you off, then find those less visited national parks you can go to, like North Cascades National Park, that like you can pretty much drive in and park anywhere and do anything you want to do, or go to Capitol Reef National Park. Like, again, a lesser visited national park in Utah that is our favorite national park that you're going to find less people are going to be at. And there is no entrance fee even to get in. So you just drive through the park and you just, pull off and park where you want to. And so there are ways you can avoid, or go to like Death Valley National Park, which is a gorgeous national park. You don't want to do it in the summer. I wouldn't recommend. But if you go in like November or December, like there's no one there. Like there's so many opportunities to visit parks that aren't busy. If that's what's holding you back, you can find those ones to go to. If you have ones on your bucket list you want to go to, just go in knowing they're going to be busy and prepare for that and be pleasantly surprised if they're not.
And North Cascades, that's in Washington State, right?
Yep.
Okay, and that's Cammy on my team. They just went last fall to that one. And oh my gosh, the pictures from that
Yes.
were
It's like a mini
stunning.
glacier, I would say. Like it has,
That's what it looked like in the
yes.
pictures.
Yeah, and they have glaciers there. I think they maybe, don't quote me on this, but they could have more glaciers there than they do in Glacier National Park. And we actually hiked up to a glacier, and you're not supposed to walk on them, but we had to put our feet on them a little bit. They don't say not to, but they say because you don't
Yeah.
want to fall through and whatever. So for safety reasons. But of course, we had to touch the snow and do all that.
Mhm.
But you can hike right up to a glacier. And we on that hike saw like three bears, just black bears. So that was good. Three black bears. I don't think they have grizzlies there. I don't think. And then we saw on the whole hike probably like 20 people. Like it was like gorgeous. And it was a beautiful hike the whole way. And we did it with our kids. They were little and we all pushed through and it was awesome. So, yes, so those lesser visited ones sometimes are lesser visited just maybe because of location or maybe because of advertising, whatever it might be, but they're well worth visiting as well.
Yeah, so there might be like some good alternative, similar, like that's a good example. If you're looking for glacier type scenery, that one has it, but without all the crowds.
Yes. Yep.
Now, when they were going, they ran into, wildfire, forest fire problems. So I don't know if you have any suggestions about that, but they ended up, as per your theme of, I think, today's podcast, they just went on anyway.
Mhm.
And then they ended up, like, the park was closed, I think, or parts of it were closed one day. But then one day it was open and the skies were clear and they were able to go and do the things. But I don't know if you had any trouble with that. It seems like we're having lots of fires in the last few years, but.
Yeah, we've been lucky to not have to change our plans per se. We did drive through a couple wildfires when we were going to Alaska this past summer. So that was interesting. Like driving where the guy was like, you better hurry, they're gonna close the road. Or like, do we go? Do we not go? Okay, we're gonna go. And like through it and all, smoky and like crazy, but we got through it. But it was okay. But yeah, I would say with that, like, I mean, obviously we can't predict Mother Nature, so it's hard to know, but seasonality, there are certain times when it's more likely that something like that'll happen. But I also know with the national parks, they do their best to keep them open as much as possible, at least parts of the park. So yeah, that's just one of those you take a chance, on. And another reason maybe to have travel insurance in case you are flying in or have a lot of things booked, like to have that just in case that happens, because you can't predict it. You can't predict, just like you go to Disney, you can't predict if a hurricane's going to come through and the park's going to close. And I know for those that stayed sometimes when those things came in, they had the parks to themselves the next day.
It's a good
So
point.
similar for a national park, if you're willing to go. And again, I can't stress enough around the national parks how much cool stuff there is to do that aren't in the parks. So you go to Yellowstone and let's just say Yellowstone was closed, like the whole thing. Let's hope that never actually happens, but like for
That's
whatever.
a big one. That's a big park, right?
It's a big park, exactly. So let's hope it doesn't. But if per se, I mean, there's Grand Tetons is down south, and then you go into Montana, and you've got like Bozeman, and you've got Red Lodge, and you got the Beartooth Mountains. Like you've got so many other things to do. So again, if you're disappointed, of course, you're not going to see what you came to see, but there are other things to do all around everywhere you go that are beautiful and gorgeous too. So just have an open mind to look and maybe just adjust things slightly with the hope that the wildfire gets under control and the park will be back open and you can explore it maybe a day or two later.
So, do you have any suggestions of parks to visit this summer if families are looking to head to a national park?
So I always think that in the summer, like if you're looking like, so you heard me say for Glacier, be careful when you're going to go for the going to the Sun Road. The rest of the parks, I think any of the northern parks in June, July, and August, like are great to visit. When I say northern, I'm talking about like, like Washington and Oregon, and then into like in Montana with Glacier, Yellowstone, and Wyoming. Like any of those, like kind of northern ones, I think the summer is a great time to visit those. If your kids are like my kids, hiking in the heat is like not fun. So we try to avoid the ones where it's gonna be hot, and for us, like in July, Tennessee's too hot. So
Yeah,
we're kind of like, you know, the farther north we can go, the better. And Utah, even for Utah, I would say if you can go to Utah like at spring break, it may be a little
Utah
bit
gets hot.
cooler,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be hiking's gonna be better. And you know, you maybe not swimming, you know, anywhere at that time. But I think April is a great time to visit Utah. And then, yeah, and if you're in the other ones and you know, you go up to Maine, you only really want to do Maine. Maine closes in October too. So you go up to Acadia. That's another good one to do in the summer. So I would really recommend any of those that would be in the northern part of the country that you can visit other times a year, but not the same experience.
And we did our first trip to Utah over spring break, which I thought was a great idea. That's because you're not going to Florida like everybody else is.
Yep.
So, and we found, yeah, like Bryce Canyon still had a little snow. So that was kind of amazing. And then Zion, we actually did get hot by the, high afternoon there, but it started off, cool in the morning. So, and we've been there in October too. And that was also a really good,
Yeah.
nice weather time to do Utah. But yeah, don't I see people going in the summer and I think, oh gosh, do you know how hot it gets?
Yeah. And I
Like
don't
over
think
100
they
degrees,
know.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't think they quite maybe understand that it's like this. It seems like it's like in the middle of the country, like it should, but it's like no, it's like blah. Like yeah, I would
It's
not. I
right
would
next to
leave your
Colorado. It should be cool.
Yeah, 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 exactly. It's like, no, no, but especially if you're RVing too. Like, I'm like, oh, being in an RV when it's 100 some degrees, even if you have full
Mm.
hookups, like it's hot still. So, I mean, at nice night it cools off, which is nice. But yes, I think April, maybe May, and then I think October would be a beautiful time to visit Utah too.
So since you have seen so many national parks, do you have a couple of favorites? I'm sure it's hard to narrow
No,
them
this we
down, but
actually do. So
you
people
do.
ask me
Okay.
traveling full time, like, where are your favorite places? And like, then I got to name off like 5 or 10 things. I'm like, I don't know. But when it comes to national parks, we do have an order. So ours is Glacier National Park is our favorite. That's been at the top and has not changed. And people always like try to get me to change that. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like that's at the top.
And
And
why is that your favorite?
I think it's just it's so we've been to Banff and Jasper, and then yes, that
Oh, and I
competes.
want to go there too. Yeah. How does it compare to those?
A Glacier is like the little brother, little sister of like Banff and Jasper. So if you're gonna do
Okay.
a road trip, go to Glacier first and be awed and amazed, and then go to Waterton Lakes, which is in Canada, and then make your way to Banff and Jasper because it's kind of a good like progression to go. So I would say for that reason, but it's just the mountains are just gorgeous and the color of the water and like just the wildlife. And there's just so many things about it that just like spoke to us and we just loved, like love, love, love. And the Utah National Parks are like amazing, don't get me wrong, but we're not really desert people. So I think that comes into account too. So for us, the mountains, the glacier water, that whatever color you want to call that glacier water, like I just love it. It's like my favorite color. And so I think all of that for me was what for us made Glacier be what it was. And then our second one is Yellowstone because it's Yellowstone. And if you've never been, like you just got to go because it's Yellowstone. And like there's so many different aspects to Yellowstone that if you go to visit there, like every day you're seeing and doing something different. And the wildlife and the thermal features, like it's an awesome experience and a unique place in itself to visit. And then our third one is Yosemite, because again, it's Yosemite. Like we went in the spring and the waterfalls and hiking right along the waterfalls, getting sprayed with the water, like the green, that like it was a really, really cool experience. So those are kind of our top three, but then definitely have in there dry tortugas. If you can
Uh-huh.
get to it, is like that to me, if you like beach, you like water, like that's a very, very unique experience. So Fort Jefferson and dry tortugas would
And
have
that's
that.
off the Florida Keys, right?
That's yep, that's I think
Mhm.
70 miles off of Key West. So you have to take a boat, which is it's a little bit of a wild ride, a boat, or you can fly in and you can camp overnight there. But like that's another amazing park. And then yeah, so those of course I could keep going about what I love about all of them, but those would be what would fall into our category of what we always share as our top ones.
And what about the parks around Yosemite, like Saguaro? Is that right? And Kings
Yes, yes.
Canyon? Is that what it
Kings
is?
Canyon. Yep. It's so
Yeah,
Sequoia and Kings Canyon and those ones like
Sequoia. Yes.
yeah. If you're going to Yosemite, make sure you add those on. If you live in the area and you can come back and forth, whatever. But if you're like you're flying in just to do Yosemite, add Sequoia and Kings Canyon on. Make sure to check your dates because those ones do open later as well. But seeing those gigantic trees like is like wild. Like you can't even believe that they're like there. And I know Yosemite has some of them, but like that those are really cool. Again, lesser visited national parks that are well worth setting a day aside for each. And on our site, we have like how to spend a day in Sequoia and a day in Kings Canyon. I think that'd be plenty of time. If you only have one day, even you could do it if you're okay, driving, for a decent amount. But yeah, those are definitely ones that I think should be on your list if you visit Yosemite. And then the other one we really like, of course, is the Redwoods and Muir Woods right outside of San Francisco. Like that place like spoke to us. Like it was
Mm,
crazy. Just walk through and it's Muir Woods. So it's like it's not quite the redwoods, but the redwoods are so spread out as a national park. It's a very different experience. Where in Muir Woods, like you just go and walk in here and walking through the woods was just it was very magical. And I do believe I didn't put that on the list because Muir Woods isn't a national park, but is whatever national, whatever they call it, monument or whatever it is. But that I think you also need a registration for that as well. So if you are looking to go to Muir Woods, make sure to look that up and see if you do need an entry ticket because it is a smaller area, but another one that is one we always remember.
and one thing I meant to ask you earlier was just, I don't know, it seems like there's a, like, how important is the order that you do things in a national park? It sounds like it's not that important to you because you just are less of a planner and show up. But, like it seems like with Yellowstone or like people like, okay, first you go here and then you go to this and then you go to that. And.
I think it really has to do with how much time you have. So, like when we went to Acadia National Park, we only had 2.5 days. That was because we were doing a whole East Coast road trip. So, we only had 2.5 days. So, we went to Acadia. We knew once we got on the main road of the main loop of the park, you can't turn around. It's only one direction. So,
Mhm.
we looked at the road and we said, okay, we're on the road and this is what we want to do. So, we have to do this hike first, even though we would have preferred to do this one, but that's farther down the road and we couldn't backtrack. So it was like we had to kind of lay out like what we could do just to stay on the road because we only had that one day to do that part of the park. So I would say the same thing. Like if you're looking to do Glacier and you only have 2 days, 3 days, I would recommend a week, but you only have 2 or 3 days.
Mhm.
Then when you're doing the Going to the Sun road, like look at it and see what's on that road because are you going to drive it again or not? And book and plan things based on your time and how far of a drive it is because most places it is a drive in the national parks to get from one place to the other. You don't want to drive all the way and go, oh wait, we've got to do that, and then drive back and then drive back again and pass something. So I do think it takes a day before planning. So before you're going to go in the morning, get out your national park, map you get when you first go to the visitor center and look at it and circle the things you want to do. Look at the roads, look where you need to go and make sure that you do know where you want to stop once you get in the car and start driving. Or like in our case, like we'd get in the car and my husband just look at me like, where are we going? And I'd pull out the map, like, okay, we're going here. And then I'd be looking as we're driving at what the next place is, like, oh yeah, I want to go there too. And like, making sure we'd stop there. But so I do think for that reason, it is good the night before to kind of at least look at it and say, here's what I don't want to miss. Because the worst thing you do is you drive all the way an hour past something and then realize, oh, that was an hour back and we should have turned right there and we missed it. And now do we have time to go back? So it's worth looking at and doing that. But again, if you have time that you're going to be coming back the next day, then you just add that to the list for the next day. Because if you do allow yourself just to go in the park and kind of just drive around and take random turns and like just kind of explore, you will find things you didn't even know were there
Mhm.
too. So it is nice to have that time if you can block a day that's just kind of random. Like we're just going to go drive. Let's pack a cooler, pack snacks, like we're ready to go. Let's just go drive and see where it takes us. And maybe you only stop one place. You fall in love
Mhm.
with that spot and you spend like all day around Old Faithful because you could if you wanted to. And like that's okay. Like that's an awesome experience.
Love it. All right. Is there anything else you want to share you think we need to know as we're planning for national parks this year?
I would just say above all else, check the national park website to find out about the vehicle registration. I've had multiple people reach out to me and say, we planned our trip, but I didn't know I needed vehicle registration. I didn't know
Yeah.
the Going to the Sun Road was going to open or wasn't open yet. So for things like that, I would say just check their website and do some research to find out like when are the busiest times? When has there been forest fires in the past? Like kind of know some of these things just to prepare yourself for it, but overall, just go with an open mindset that it's going to be not a Disney trip. This is a relaxing, take your time, like
Yeah.
whatever, and have that be part of what the adventure and the journey is to get yourself into this place of just enjoying the nature and the outside and like the not having to rush from thing to thing and pick your top like three things you want to do in the national park and make sure you really understand how to do those, but challenge yourself to only pick 3 so the rest of the time can be open to what presents itself once you're there or once you talk to the ranger. And we've gone before, like there's this hike I really want to do in Glacier. It's the Iceberg Lake hike. And we've never been able to do it because every time we've gone and we've gone to talk to the ranger, they're like, it's closed because of grizzly bear activity. Like, no joke. Every time we've gone. And the one time we waited and went one like a day later, and that night they closed it before we were
Mhm.
gonna go. So I'm like, why didn't we go today? So like there's those things that, and again, like it happens. I'm not gonna go hike with the grizzlies. So like it's cool. I don't need to do it.
Right.
But if you have those things that are at the top of your list, then you can make sure when you get there, you knock those off, you make those happen, and then you have other time just open to just explore and enjoy the area.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of middle ground approach. A little bit of planning, a little bit of doing as you feel like in the moment, and that's a good way to travel, I think. All
Yes,
right, tell us where we can find you online.
yes, we're at Crazy Family Adventure everywhere. So you can find us all over the place on Crazy Family Adventure. We have content on our site that is about RVing. We also have a ton of content just about national parks or things to do in different cities. We have like a Yellowstone vacation that doesn't even include much of Yellowstone. It's all stuff around Yellowstone. So if you want to try to do some of those type of things that are a little outside of the national parks, we have that as well. And then we do have our guides. So if you're like, okay, I want to go to Glacier, I need some help and some guidance, our guides are meant to, you can follow them like to the T, like step by step if you want to, but they're also great guides to buy to just get an idea of what you can do, a good starting point, and then you can dive in and really narrow in on what the things are that you want to do. And those guides include like where to stay, where to eat, kind of a timeline for what to do each day. There's a lot of really detailed information in there. So we have it on Glacier, Yellowstone, we have a Utah road trip, a 10-day Utah road trip guide. We have an Arches guide, and we have an Acadia guide, and then a Capitol Reef guide. I believe those are all of them. And then we also have a national park planning workbook that is not about any specific national park. It's just walks you through how to plan a national park trip, like things to write down, time. It's how you want to do things. Just kind of give you a good starting point to then dive into the details on the actual national park that you want to visit. So yeah, so you can check that out on our site. If you go to Crazy Family Adventure, there's a shop option. If you click that, you'll see all of those guides. And then we also have an email newsletter that we send out once a week. That, of course, I'm talking about all these fun different things, different places to go and things to do. So you go to our site, you can join that email list as well. And then Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. What else are we on?
You have lots of great videos.
Yes, yeah, we try to do a lot of great videos, so we have that all over on social media as well, and just love to help people plan awesome trips, especially to national parks.
Yeah, and I highly recommend like getting one of her guides. I mean, like I'm a big believer in why reinvent the wheel? Someone else has already figured it out. So I love to always follow what someone else has laid out, at least as a starting point for
Yes,
us. And then we can tweak it from there. So definitely go check that out. Okay. Awesome conversation. Thanks so much, Brianna, for sharing your wisdom with us on national parks. I hope everyone's inspired to go out and pick a national park this year and go see it, and don't be intimidated, just dive in and
that's right.
enjoy the experience, whatever it ends up being, right?
Exactly, exactly, and thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone, we will see you on the next episode.